Right on. Well, it's great to meet you. I'd like to begin our conversation with we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of this pandemic. How did you get through the pandemic, and how did it subsequently change you?
Interesting question. Pandemic was a challenge. I have three kids. They're now 10, 8, and 4. And so my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and everything shifted here, right? Luckily, technologically, we were able to do that effectively. I know a lot of people were scrambling and setting up Zooms and murals for making sure teams can still engage with each other and it was for me, I think the greatest challenge was just that work-life balance,
Yeah.
to be honest. And it's still something that I struggle with because, I'm up here in my bedroom. You can't see behind me, but I got a unmade bed and maybe some clothes on the ground. You'll never know. But my kid will just come banging on the door anytime, and my wife will ask for my help sometimes, and I'm in meetings or I'm in work and I'm focused, and it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, and everybody's dealing with it. And I think that the companies have realized that, and they've made the changes necessary to retain the folks that they want. That's now a perk, is this hybrid environment. So I think it's changed the way that we sort of view how to engage with others. But I prefer that hybrid environment. I don't want to go back to the office every single day.
Yeah.
I also don't want to be here because you lose out on some of like that big room planning. Like if you're going to be doing design thinking sessions or you're trying to problem solve with a bunch of people, there's no substitute for getting together face to face in a room with people. So I really like the new hybrid stuff, but I would
Yeah.
say that work-life balance is it's now just there's no balance. It's just work is life is work is life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a laborist, so I understand that balance. That throws everything out of whack. You're just trying to figure out where the dividing line is, so to speak.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, you're a framework aficionado, you're a
Mhm.
consultant, there's a lot, you're a co-founder, but if I was to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders, it's career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I would say I help people. I help people solve problems in their day to day. That's why they hire me. But I also help people in their careers. And that's really one of the reasons why I got into consulting. I remember I was in business school at the University of Houston, and we were having a portion of a class on brand. Like, what is your brand? What are you known for? And I had to think about it for a while. And the thing that resonated the most with me was that, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Everyone's heard that one.
Mhm.
But that's how I wanted people to view me, right? They could come in and they could ask any question, and I would kind of drop everything and go help them out. And hey, let's work on this together. Let's figure that out. I've also described it as, in school where you've got a lab partner and, you've got 4 or 5 people that you're working together on a project. You don't want to be that team member that just, sits on their phone and doesn't contribute. You want to be that lab partner that's going to help the team progress.
Yeah.
And I'm not above doing anything to help that team progress, right? Some people will say, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that. That's below me or below my level. I'll go get coffee. If that's the thing that the team needs right now, I'll sweep the floor." I mean, I don't have any problems, picking up the slack where the team needs it. And so I think for me, that's what consulting is about, is being a team player, really getting in there and wanting to help folks and solving problems. And the last thing I'll say is when you get more mature in your consulting career, you're more responsible for sales and business development and things like that. But as a consultant, you're really looking to get to that trusted advisor role, right? Where you and a client they care about each other and you care about their own personal career progression and their life. And I'll give you one quick example. As a client called me the other day and he was asking me about pylons for his foundation. He was having some foundation issues, and he just called me up out of the blue and said, "Ask for any guidance or insight that I may have on that." We have a lot of those issues in Houston, right? Because
Yeah.
we live on a swamp. But that's to me, that is a marker or an indicator of trusted advisor status with that individual. And so that's the kind of relationship and the kind of thing that got me into consulting. So hopefully the grade school kids can understand that.
Oh, absolutely they will. What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
I was big into animals, so veterinarian
Yeah.
at the time. I actually remember one time, I think I was 10 years old. That's about third grade, right? So we were driving down the street and I saw a dead raccoon, right? It was just, roadkill or whatever, and I just burst into tears.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, "Well, what's wrong? What's wrong, honey?" And I felt such empathy for this, this poor little creature that had been, destroyed in the road. But as it happens, veterinarian was not in the stars for me, I guess.
So how did we get here? Tell me about the seeds that got into you to want to help people, to be a consultant, to be an entrepreneur. How did all of this kind of grow into who you are today?
Sure. So I have a very unconventional path, I would say, to consulting. So I went to undergraduate and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are in that situation. So what do you do in a situation like that? You follow your passions. So I'm not going to ask you to guess because you'll never guess, but I majored in Spanish in college. Okay. I majored in Spanish. I took French. I took Portuguese. I did like study abroad things. I was in theater. I mean, I played rugby. I just did stuff that I liked, right? And that was all I knew. I was just like, I'm just going to kind of follow what I'm interested in. The problem is you get into the real world, and what am I going to do with a Spanish degree?
Yeah.
I can be a teacher. I could be a translator. Maybe I go into the UN or something. I'm not sure, but I sort of took some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized after a few years that I needed to go back to school, right? I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wasn't getting where I wanted to be with just this degree. So when I went back to business school in the very first semester, very first class, they had an exercise, a mandated essay, where you had to go out and figure out a profession that you wanted to be like a person within a profession that you wanted to be like within 10 years. And that really makes you introspective. It's like, well, who do I interview? Where am I going? What do I want to do? And at that point, somebody I graduated from high school with, I was just, cruising through LinkedIn and I found his profile and the things that he was describing as a senior manager at Boston Consulting Group. It's like, wow, that looks really cool. He's doing lots of, very different things. And I said, well, what is this? I'd never even heard of consulting. Never heard of it. I don't know how that's possible now,
Yeah.
multiple years later, but I had never heard of it. And as soon as I figured out what it was, I said, oh my gosh, that is for me. And I poured everything into it, started doing consulting certificates, as part of like a subdomain expertise within my MBA. I started taking classes where you consult with people outside of the university, and I really just focused everything on that. Started, learning about case studies, et cetera. And so that for me, that was sort of my personal journey into getting into consulting. And it really, for me, the thing that resonated the most is what I mentioned previously, is the ability to solve lots of different cool problems, but really help people at the end of the day.
So who's been a hero for you in your life?
Who's been a hero for me? I would say as now seeing I'm going to go back to my mom. You're not going to make me cry, I promise, Joe. But the now seeing, you take it for granted when
Mhm.
you grow up. My parents got divorced when I was in fourth grade, and and I stayed with my mom, right? And so you don't think about it when you're a kid about everything that goes into it from a single mother's perspective. But having to help with the child care now. I mean, and granted, my wife is, a stay-at-home mom, but doing my fair share of, trash and cooking and bedtime routines, and there's just it consumes your life to a certain degree, right? And it's so much additional stress and additional pressure and trying to raise good people, right? I mean, there's so many different aspects and facets to that that you just take for granted when you grow up, right? Having a warm meal on the stove, a warm dinner every single night, clean clothes, things like that. And it takes a lot of work and effort. And so, shout out to the single moms out there, but it's that would be the closest thing that I could think of that would describe what you were asking.
So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten. I think it's kind of uh, it's an anti-advice that turned into good advice. And let me explain a little bit more. So I remember when I was first getting into consulting, there's a lot of like negative stereotypes. I'd say you've heard of lawyer jokes.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard of those, but people have a similar view of consulting. Um, it's like they come in and we're going to spend all this money and it's going to fail, and then we kick them out and they have no responsibility. So when I was first getting into it, that was what my grandfather said to me. He said, "You know what, Tommy? The way I see a consultant, you pay them, they come into your office, they ask you for your watch off your wrist, and then they tell you what time it is." And that's what consultant was to him. And so for me, that was now a North Star. That was a guiding point, is that I never wanted a client of mine to have that kind of perception of me, that I'm not adding any value, that I'm just coming in and essentially telling them what they knew to do already anyway. And so the way that I approach my career and the way that I engage with people is not a, hey, I'm the smartest guy in the room and I'm the answer man. I got, just bring me in and I got it covered. It's really about co-creation and listening, active listening, and ensuring that we're working this problem together and that we come to an agreement on how this solution should be put into place. And then you're really working together as a team, as opposed to just dropping off a PowerPoint presentation and then walking out the door. Because I never want to be that person.
Yeah. So, if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Who would I love to meet? So I think, well, there's a side story here that I really like. I mentioned rugby earlier, so
Yeah.
I watch those, but I'm also big into like the World Cup, and so I watch a lot of soccer. So my mind immediately went to Lionel Messi, right? Because
Yeah.
he's famously came over into the U.S. now. But a fun side story, I have actually met Messi before. I picked him up
Wow.
from the airport
Wow.
in a in a minivan for an event that was in Houston, Texas back in 2010, I believe, called the Kickmasters.
Yeah.
And it was at NRG Stadium. And people were coming from all over the world because there was $1 million prize for winning this competition. And since I had taken Spanish and Portuguese and French, I ended up getting tapped to pick up these different players from the airport just because of a side job that I had at one point. And so, so 6 a.m. in the morning, I rolled up in a minivan and picked up Messi and his cadre, of folks, and drove him to the hotel. So I was gonna say Messi, but then I realized I already met Messi. So there you go.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, I
So, let
mean,
me ask.
so, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, go.
No, no, no. That's great. That's exactly where I love to see these answers go to. Um, Let me ask you this: what is the motivation for you every day to wake up and not only to help people and to do your job, but to evolve as a person? What is that motivation for you?
Yeah, I think that's it's certainly a personal thing. But and it's I've struggled honestly to find my own motivation. And the older I get, the more I realize that motivation is challenging, because motivation is fleeting. I mean, it's very hard to wake up every day and feel motivated, right, about your day and about what you're doing. And the more, again, the more time that passes, I realize that discipline is more important than motivation for keeping you on track with your goals. And so what I do, one thing that helps me, and I'll just pull it up over here. I'm not sure you'd be able to see it, but I've got a sheet of paper and it's called my 100-day goal.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I do is I say, here for the next 100 days, these are the things that I want to accomplish. And, for me right now, I signed up for a Tough Mudder race in October, and I'm really focused on like getting fit and ready for that. So I've got goals related to working out, and I've got goals related to diet. But I purposefully put things in 100-day chunks because that gives me that discipline and that motivation. It gives me a focus for a short period of time. And so once this is done, right, then I can put another couple things and say, I'm really going to focus the next 100 days on reading, on getting more knowledgeable in a certain subject, or on being a better dad in, this X, Y, and Z realm, right?
Yeah.
And engaging with my children. And so then I'll, pull that chunk. And so for me, it's not so much about the motivation, it's more around that discipline and setting up short-term achievable goals that allows me day to day to look at it and say, hey, have I met my goals today? Have I done exactly what I said I was going to do, made that promise to myself and kept it? And that's a motivating factor to me in my own personal life. So again, I'm not sure if it answers your question
It
exactly,
does.
but that's how I do it.
Yeah, no, it does. It certainly does. So of all of these things that you've done, become and overcome in your life and accomplished, what are you the proudest of?
So we've gotten personal here a couple of times. So in that vein, right, keeping that, I've sort of felt when I graduated college, right, and I was trying to find myself, like we talked about before. I got into sort of some negative patterns, let's say, around just not being happy with myself. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was depressed, but just a general malaise about life, right? No directionality. And, where am I going and what am I doing and why am I here? And I mean, I guess there's a lot of angst that happens, when sort of young adulthood of those types of grandiose questions in our lives. Um, but I think the ability to at some point say, you know what, this is not helping me.
Yeah.
Just sitting here pondering and meandering through life aimlessly it's not getting me where I want to go. And, I look back on that time in sort of my, let's say, mid 20s, early to mid 20s, and say, I probably didn't utilize my time as best I could or as much as other people did because I didn't have that focus. But the ability of saying, all right, that's it. Let's stop doing that and let's focus on longer term goals. And, I met my wife, and she certainly helped me out in giving me some of that directionality and some of that motivation we were talking about of like, hey, I want to be a better person. What do I want our lives to look like together? That kind of thing. And so I guess looking back on it, the thing I'm most proud about is just the ability to pivot and shift and change and say, let's cut it here. That part of my life is over, and let's refocus on something for longer term sort of gain.
So at the end of the day, Tommy, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think that I am a genuine person. I and I hope that those clients and friends and family members would say that as well. I feel like when you engage with certain people in your ecosystem, that false genuineness is abound, right? It's like I'm always trying to get ahead, right? There's competition, there's free market capitalism, there's, individual selfishness. But I feel like, and sometimes it's hard to tell, but I do feel like a lot of times people are, trying to sell you something, or there's an ulterior motive, if you will. And it's been rare in my opinion to, just generally approach somebody that's fully there and for helping other people, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation. And so I would like people to think that I am genuine and that I truly do care about that. Um, and maybe, as a side note, maybe able to make some people laugh here and there.
Yeah.
I think laughter is, that helps relieve tension in situations. They say it's the best medicine. So
Yeah.
maybe genuineness and affability.
I dig it. So if anyone wants to hire you, reach out, learn more about you, the good business, where do they go?
Sure. So our site is activeraconsulting.com. You could find my contact information there at linkedin.com/Tommy Ogden. Super easy to find. There is another Tommy Ogden who lives in the UK. He's a physicist,
Oh,
but I was able to steal that
good
LinkedIn
job.
from him. And then my email address, togden, OGDEN, at activeraconsulting.com. And would be happy to talk about anything that we've discussed today, and business as well, if interested.
I love it. Tommy, this is great, man. What a great conversation. I love your backstory, all the passion. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Joe. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Best of luck. Take care.